Oh, Lex Luthor Jr. says, both my basement and garage are too small for everything I have, so my tools and materials are split between the two. Oh, do you have any suggestions for working with dual location shops? That's a tough one, because I mean, a lot of people deal with that. I was watching Woodford Guitars winter up there in Canada, and his bandsaw is in an uninsulated room, and he's talking about how he can saw for like a certain amount of time before he has to go in and warm up again. But you're asking about how to about bridging two spaces with dual location shops. That's really difficult. I try and double up, but you're saying both spaces are too small. You might consider a philosophical split between the two spaces, i.e. one certain kind of thing happens in one space and another certain kind of thing happens in another space. I have recently had a sea change in terms of the work that I do in my house as opposed to the work I do in my shop. What work I do in my house? What work do I do in my house? Yeah, I haven't done a lot of work in my house, but this really interesting thing happened recently. And Lex Luthor Jr., I hope this is somewhat germane to your question. My office at the house has always just been a place for me to like be able to sit and read and do some computer research. But the layout of it has been more aesthetic than any work thing because I don't do work in the house. This is the space I do work. But over Christmas, we had some guests in the house and we were moving some furniture around, and we had this desk from DWR that was 24 inches deep, and it had to go somewhere. So I shoved it in my office. And then that night I was looking at it and I was like, wow, I want to sit there and work. And so I sat there and put a lamp on it and I started working. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I was working on an old paper model, and I ended up like really enjoying being in my office at home and working on small like stuff that required that sort of finesse. And so I bought a workbench for the house, but specifically for a certain kind of work, like the kind of work I'll do in the house. Like I'll bring something in and take it apart and put it back together to fix something in the house, or I'll do some refined graphical work. Frankly, it's nice to have a space that is genuinely clean for graphical work, because this isn't it. This is not the work surface I want to do like highly precise paper modeling on. There's too much crap going on in here. This is my way of saying, like, even I've been building stuff now for, 40, 50 years of my life, and I'm still coming up with brand new notions about how to work. I am as surprised as anybody that I wanted to work in my office at home, but the table first informed me that the room could feel a certain way when I was working in it that I didn't expect. And then once I gave into that, I realized this whole nother path of being able to do a certain kind of work that I hadn't been thinking about. So what I would suggest to you, Lex Luthor Jr., is to perhaps think about the two shops and try and do some separation. You won't achieve a perfect separation of like maybe one shop is for dusty stuff and the other is for non-dusty stuff, or maybe one is for fumey stuff and non-fumey stuff. I'm sure within the panoply of things that you make, you might be able to come up with some categories. And the category helps you know what's supposed to be where. That's the main thing. The category of what you do in a space helps me remember what I'm supposed to do there. It helps me remember what should go there and where I should go. Because the biggest problem with two different spaces and a full set of tools that spread between them is, where is the thing? Where's the thing that you need? Sure, hammers are easy to find, but like one tool you brought from one space to the other, that'll ruin your whole weekend. Let's see here. John Rudy asks, what jam has being organized gotten you out of? That is a lovely question. And I'll tell you. So I have a storage space here in the Mission, deep storage space. That's where all the costumes are. It's where my rickshaw is from the spot build. It's where a whole bunch of bigger stuff is. And I also have all of my not only are all my costumes there, but all my safety gear is also there. And my safety gear is like everything I ever used on Mythbusters, whether it's fireman's turnout gear, aluminized fireman's turnout gear. I have a bomb suit, I have a beekeeper suit, I have 2 suits of kendo armor. All of the safety equipment that I have, whether it's full Mustang winter survival suits, all my safety gear is stored in duffels. And so all of those duffels have big tags on them that say what's in them. And when we got this space about 3 or 4 years ago, we specifically set aside an area for all the safety gear. And there it is. That sits there for 2 years. And over the summer, my wife and I did some kayaking. And she was like, oh, if we're going to do some kayaking here on the West Coast, I'm going to need my water shoes. Do you have any idea where they are? And I was like, well, I know where they should be. So I went over to the storage space. I went to the safety equipment area. I looked at all the duffels, and here on the right were my dive bag and my wife's dive bag. We're both scuba divers. And I pulled out my wife's dive bag. I haven't touched it in 10 years. That's how long it's been since we went diving in Hawaii. I pulled out my wife's dive bag, opened up a pocket I hadn't opened in a decade, and there were her water shoes. And that made me feel so good about being organized. Like, I felt like a secret agent. I felt like I went to my hidey hole, and instead of like looking through a whole bunch of passports of all different identities, I was all my different safety equipment, and everything that I needed was exactly where I wanted it to be. Oh, such an endorphin rush. Should I do one more? All right. Heracles. This is a difficult question. On Sharp Organization, any tips for sharing workspace with your significant other? This is definitely a question for Bill Duran. How to manage a system you understand from a system, how to manage a system you understand from a system others can understand. Yeah. Somebody else actually asked another very specific one that kind of had to do with this. So let me find this one. It was about, let's see here. There we go. Here's another question along the same lines. Steve P. is soon to take over a new workshop, and it's currently a bit of a mess. What advice would you have for a team leader coming in who needs to implement new organization and workshop etiquette, knowing that we use lots of different tools and store hundreds of different parts that are constantly used and replenished? Both of these, to me, have the same answer, and that is deep amounts of communication and a recognition that it's going to be a process, not a task. That's how we started this live stream. It's where I'm going to finish it. So when you're working with your significant other in a space, the most important thing is the same most important thing for your relationship, which is communication. And really being open to communication. We can get so tied into our mental space when we're working on stuff and doing our thing. We can get all like in here. It's important to keep zooming out and checking with your partner about their experience of the same. And is the space serving them? Communication is about aligning your goals. It's about aligning them and learning where they're not aligned and accommodating for that. And by the same token, Steve P., you're taking over a new shop, okay? Which means that you're going to be I'm assuming you're going to be the supervisor of this shop, and you've got a whole bunch of people working, and they all have different work practices. One thing I know doesn't work is just setting a bunch of rules and hoping everyone follows them. People won't follow rules unless they make sense to them. Well, I mean, ideally, people follow rules that make sense to them. Your results may vary. It is primarily a process about aligning your goals. So to me, as a supervisor, I've gotten a lot of inspiration from watching how Tom Sachs has built the culture of his shop and his shop assistants in terms of everybody understands what the sort of overarching philosophy of the shop is, and what the philosophy of each of the builds are, and the philosophy of the tools and the processes that get used within those builds. Tom didn't come out of the womb that way. That is something he's developed over the decades that he's had a shop. And the same is true for me in my shop. I have a way that I work, but frankly, I think one of the detriments I've had as a supervisor in the past is I haven't necessarily gotten my shop assistants to understand right off the bat just what the philosophy here is. And the last two that have worked with me, Freddie and Jen, actually both really understand my philosophy in a way so deeply that when they organize stuff, I learn things, which is really freaking cool. But so you're wondering, yeah, it's a process, which means my best advice for being the supervisor of a shop you need to whip into order is plan to do a lot of meeting and talking about the organizational structure until you feel like there's buy-in. And that's the same thing about being a couple working in the same space together. Like, you've both got to have buy-in for the ultimate goal, which is that you both have a good time working and you're satisfied with the thing that you make. Not necessarily that your process wins or my process wins. It's about keeping those higher goals in mind. And again, that's the same thing with the shop. It's a process. There's a ton about this space that if I had an endless amount of time, I need to rebuild where I'm looking right here at problems I still need to solve. I need a spray booth over here, a little spray booth. I need to reorganize my files. I don't think the sanding disc should go there. Those chisels, I haven't even touched them, so I don't even know why they're up there. The dowels need a whole new way of being stored. The safety equipment is too hard to get to. The cordless tool, everything's a shit fight back there as far as I'm concerned. And it all still works fine. I'm able to use this space very, very efficiently. And yet, that was like 8 things that I would change. And each one of those things is like a half-day escapade. It's a process. This is what's happening now. And it's, the more you give yourself over to the process, the less it will feel like an imposition in your overall working and feel more like part of the dance. That's the other thing is we resist, I think often, I do, and I think lots of people do, that we resist organization in favor of getting the work done. Also because it feels like organization isn't getting something done, and it really, really is getting something done. Spending a whole day making little labels, that may feel tedious and boring, but oh man, future you is going to give you the biggest high five for doing that. Keep your mind on the prize when you're doing that kind of thing. I'll tell you, all of these questions make me, there's a show I've been wanting to host for years, which is just like a tiny shop makeover show. Wouldn't that be fun? Just like work with some sponsor like Container Store or Blix or Art Bin, and you know, go to someone's tiny little space where they've got a 1-room apartment in Manhattan, but they still want to do their thing, and we can help figure out a way for them to do their thing. Doesn't that sound like so much fun? I want to watch that show. I'm not sure I want to host it, but I totally want to watch it. All right. Yeah, I think we've covered a good amount here. Thank you guys for joining me for this live stream. San Franciscans, enjoy the fog while it lasts. And everybody else, I hope you are safe and satisfied. And I will see you next time. Cheers. Adam out. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.